Welcome to Cultivate the Ordinary podcast, curious conversations for the anxious, frustrated, and bored. I'm Travis.
And I'm Jessie. So often we're held captive by screens, schedules, and media that's mind-numbing and polarizing. This leaves us seeing dimly through a fog. We want to spark more imagination and a better awareness of God's presence in the everyday.
Join us on a fun journey of discovery and curiosity as we look at the ordinary through the lenses of joy, wonder, beauty, and hope. All right, well, back for another podcast episode. Today is it's a little bit of a different one than we've had so far in the rest of our podcasts. We're going to focus actually around the topic of pain, which is really super common. Chronic pain, researchers say, affects 52 million Americans, or 1 in 5. So that's a huge statistic. Our friend Danny Smith, who was on the podcast before and we talked about songwriting, is back, and he's had a lot of personal experience around chronic pain, but has discovered some ordinary breakthroughs that really is the impetus for a lot of, kind of what you wanted to talk about in this episode, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to get into more of his story around that, some of the things he's learned and discovered, as well as with Jess, who also has dealt and deals with chronic pains.
Yeah, so today we really just want to focus on a few stories of healing from pain that was maybe more stress and emotions related and less about dangerous injury. We want to explain how pain comes from the brain and is meant to protect us from further trauma. We don't want to suggest that everyone with pain is in the same boat and is the same here. But for some people who have had chronic pain issues with no answers or no long-term relief, this could be great news. I want to disclaimer that this podcast is for educational purposes only. We are not medical professionals, and if someone is in pain, they should be under the care of a medical provider to make sure they don't have any more critical issues going on that need treatment. So for now, just relax and consider these stories. Wonder if they might help you and find some tools in some way to help with your pain.
There's a great line of the actor Alan Alda who said, "Begin challenging your own assumptions. Your assumptions are your windows on the world. Scrub them off every once in a while or the light won't come in." I think that's true of what we're going to dive into here. So assumptions about what we think is happening. So Danny, have had a busy summer. I know you've had a lot going on with your summer. Tell us about anything, highlights so far, or things going on?
All right, yeah. Well, thanks for having me back on again. The first one was awesome. Really enjoyed it. This summer I've been helping my daughter open an icy stand in our town, and she's been open about 2 weeks. It's going really well. So that's been dominating a lot of my attention and free time, but it's been great to...
What's the name? So give it a shout out.
Summer Snow.
Summer Snow.
Yeah, she came up with that, and she did the logo. She's learning everything about starting a business. So it's been great.
If you're passing through Clinton, South Carolina, and you want an icy...
You stop at Summer Snow.
It's in Clinton?
It's in Clinton.
Okay,
yeah.
Nice.
Right downtown.
Awesome. All right. Very cool. So let's just dig right in then. So there was a story recently about an NBA player, right? And so take us in a little bit of what that on pain and his story.
Yeah, my cousin is in Missouri, and he told me about this NBA player. His name is Michael Porter Jr. He went to Mizzou. He was a very, very highly rated recruit. But when he got to Mizzou, he had all these back problems, and I think he only ended up playing 1 or 2 games or something. So, of course, it was a big disappointment. He ended up having a couple surgeries, I think, while he was at Mizzou. You can check me on all these details because I'm giving a very broad overview. But anyway, he ended up being drafted into the NBA. He's still having back problems. And the point of this article was he discovered this book called Healing Back Pain by Dr. John Sarno. Read the book, followed up with some therapists and things like that, and feels like his back is completely healed. Now, the reason that caught my attention is because of my own story. I dealt with chronic back pain for years. And I also came across a book called Healing Back Pain by John Sarno, read it, and through that process healed my own back pain. And I tell people about it constantly, and most people just kind of like look at you like interesting and move on. I have gotten people interested though who have looked into it. My brother and sister have both gotten a lot of relief from the same book. But I want to get the word out. Like, it excites me to talk about it. And every time I meet somebody and they're like, oh, like with their back or whatever, I'm like, oh, would you be interested in reading this book?
So the funny thing is, I'm wondering if the same people that heard you earlier, now that you're saying this in a podcast, they're totally in now. It's like,
now
oh, that's a
it.
podcast.
Now they believe it,
So
yeah.
it's like, Danny's on a podcast. It's the same message. So yeah, there's a hilarious T-shirt I saw that said, "My favorite childhood memory is my back not hurting."
Yeah.
So take us more into like a little of the backstory, pun intended, the backstory here, but like you tried different things and
No, I tried everything.
Everything. Okay.
I tried everything. No, that's so I'll preface this by saying my grandfather has back problems and my dad has had back problems in the past where he'll just, his back will get real bad for a while. And so when that first started happening to me, I thought, well, here we go, just like grandpa, just like my dad. But I'm going to say it started like around like 2009, 2010. I started having sciatica, which is nerve pain that goes down, kind of starts in the middle of your butt and goes down your leg. And it would be there off and on. Sometimes it was in my right leg. Sometimes it was in my left leg. And I looked up on YouTube and learned some stretches and how to roll around on Kansas soup and different things that that they say will help. And it actually did. It would help sometimes. But it was this nagging pain. And when I went to bed at night, it hurt. When I woke up in the morning, it would hurt. It just always hurt. And it was just bad enough that it was just like annoying all the time. My legs just always hurt. So that I would do these stretches. I was taking aspirin. It continued to get worse. I was taking aspirin. I'd take 4 aspirin or Tylenol or whatever 3 or 4 times a day. I knew that wasn't good, but it gave me some relief. So then around, let's say 2016, 2017, I started a new job. And that fall, I was supervising a bunch of people. It felt like a lot of pressure. It was kind of a new thing for me. That fall, I went to Kentucky, was playing wiffle ball with my brother, swinging this wiffle ball bat over and over, seeing who can hit it the furthest or whatever. And my back was sore that night, like my lower back. So that was a little unusual. It's usually just the sciatica. And I'm trying to keep this brief, but instead of getting better, it kept getting worse. So like over the next few days, it got worse. By the time I got back to work after that weekend, I could barely walk down the hall. I'm like shuffling in to like make my lunch and stuff. And then I started getting this weird calf pain. It was like the outside of my calf was just like burning. And I was working on a kitchen remodel at the time, and I would go to Lowe's and I'd have to sit down in the middle of the aisle until the pain would go away. So that was how I was living for a good while there. And I would say I had sciatic pain consistently 99% of the days. I had sciatic pain for at least 10 years.
Wow.
Okay, so that's what it was like living with chronic pain. Like
Yes.
you just were managing it. It kept getting worse, but you were just trying to find ways to find little bits of relief. You didn't have any hope that it was going to ever just go away because you have a bad back like your dad and your grandpa.
Yeah.
So then you find Dr. Sarno's book, and he's sort of the father of mind-body syndrome in the U.S. at least. What changed? Like what did you discover? What did you learn, and how did you apply it?
Yeah. Well, before I say that, I'll just say it. My pain went from being annoying to being I can't live like this. So I was like I told Travis earlier, both of you, but I had all these stretching mechanisms. I was stretching I was laying down on the floor in my office, bending myself in different ways, strengthening my core. I bought one of those mats that has those little pokey things that poke into your back that you lay on.
Yeah.
Soup cans, rolling around on a tennis ball, all this stuff. But it got to the point where it just dominated every thought. I'd be having a conversation with somebody and all I was thinking about is that my back really hurts. And I know there's people right now that are relating to that because it just dominates your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like at work, it got to I was seeing a chiropractor. Everything you can think of, I was trying. So at work, it got to the point where everybody's asking me about it. I've got a funny story I'll say till later, but just everybody's asking me about it. And what I realized, what I was told I needed to do was go get a steroid shot, and they put it in your lower back or whatever, and that's supposed to give some relief. So all I could think about was, I've got an appointment in 3 weeks, and this is, I'm not trying to oversell it, but there was a point where for 3 nights in a row I could not sleep. I was laying up at night, just in agony, and that was leg pain. It was my calf actually and my lower back, both. But I would just cry at night because I was going crazy. I can't sleep. I couldn't get any relief. And I just felt like I cannot live like this. Something has to change. And what was going to change is that steroid shot. So I had it scheduled, and I went to get the steroid shot. And everybody kept asking me, "Oh, how are you doing?" Well, I've got this steroid shot scheduled for the 20th or whatever. And after that, I think I'll get some relief. So that's all I was thinking about, that steroid shot. So I went to get it. I walk in, and I finally get back, and they're talking to me about it, and they're like, "Now, you brought a driver?" And I'm like, "No, nobody told me to bring a driver." And they're like, "Oh, we can't do the shot if you don't have a driver."
Oh, no.
I went out and sat in my car and just like had a breakdown.
Wow.
Like I was crying and like hitting my steering wheel. I'm like, that's all I could think about for weeks was, I'm getting relief today. And when that didn't happen, I just felt like I was losing my mind. So anyway, that night I went home. I was researching back surgery. There's a place in Texas that'll do back surgery. It was going to end up being, I think it was like $50,000. Talking to my wife, Ashley, about it. I start looking into doing a, whatever they call, like a mortgage, a home equity line of credit or loan, so that I could pay for this back surgery. So as I'm looking into that, I'm on these forums or something talking about, reading reviews about back surgery. Somebody mentions this book, and other people commented on it, like, "Yeah, this helped me." So I'm like, "Okay, what is this?" I go on Amazon, start reading reviews. I didn't even read that much. I was just like, "Okay, I'll try it." I ordered the book. 2 days later, it comes in. I read the book, and that's the moment that I create. Like from then on, things were getting better instead of worse. So that's kind of the story of how I got there. I don't remember what your original question was, Jesse.
Yeah.
But that's how I got to this point in my journey.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you expounded upon on what more happened. You know, the hopefulness of the shot, and then, you know, impending back surgery. So then, after reading the book, like, how did it help you? What were the things that you learned that maybe just like a few takeaways that were so impactful?
I mean, like I said, I didn't do much looking into this book. I didn't know what to expect. I thought it was going to be, you know, do 100 sit-ups and you got to strengthen your core.
Right.
I thought it was all that stuff. And when I got it, he just starts the writing, the way he describes the typical patient that he sees. And he was a back specialist doctor in New York. And I don't know, he worked for NYU, I believe, or something like that.
Right.
But he just starts describing personality types that he said when he started working with people with their backs, a lot of times there was no physical reason for the back pain. And then he starts getting into, in fact, we looked at 100 or 1,000 people that have never had back pain, and many, like a huge percentage of them, had degenerative discs, all the things you hear about. What else are there?
Like the
disc
scans,
all that stuff.
the bone spurs, the different abnormalities
Right.
that are attributed to pain.
Right.
There were scans of people who did not have any pain that had the same abnormalities as people who have chronic pain.
Right. So when you go to a doctor and they do an X-ray or MRI or whatever, like, and this was my experience. I was going to a chiropractor. Every time I'd go back in and, you know, pay $100 or whatever it was was like, "Well, how are you feeling since last time?" And I'd be like, I think it's, you know, I think it might be getting a little better. And week after week after week, you realize I'm not getting better. Right. But then he sent me to get an X-ray or something, and I got it and brought it back to him, and he looks at it and he's like, "Oh, okay, this is why I haven't been able to fix you. You've got spinal stenosis." So that was my diagnosis. Spinal stenosis, which is something that a nerve runs through, is too narrow, and it puts constant pressure on your sciatic nerve. Now, that didn't explain my lower back pain or my calf pain, but I took that as something's wrong with my back, and they'll do surgery for that. They'll do surgery where they go in and I guess hollow out whatever that is that your nerve runs through, and it's dangerous because the nerve runs right through there.
Wow.
But that was what led me to looking for surgery because, but yeah, like what Dr. Sarno said is, I've treated people that have spinal stenosis, slip disc, degenerative discs. I've had all this stuff, and that's not the cause of your pain. And you really need to read the book or research it for yourself, I think, because he's not like this kind of like out there kind of like natural person. He's a very, very scientific person.
Yes.
And through seeing hundreds of patients and never being able to help them until he discovered this, that was the first time he's able to help these people. And so I read the book and just totally bought into what he was saying.
Right.
So you bought into that, and we'll get into more of how that helped you. But, you know, so I'm seeing a lot of commercials, it seems like, for back pain and all of that. But there's other types of chronic ailments that I remember hearing about that we don't seem to hear about anymore.
Yeah. and Sarno talks about that. But it's funny that you say that, because if you like type in back pain one time into Google, you'll be amazed at the products and like supplements and everything you can everything you can possibly think of that will heal your back pain. But this is the only thing I found that works. But Sarno talks about how pain should not be trendy. And so one example that he brings up is when, like in the 90s, everybody started getting personal computers, and then all of a sudden everybody had carpal tunnel syndrome.
Yeah.
Where has that been?
And now like everybody's on a computer all day, and like, when's the last time you heard of somebody that had carpal tunnel syndrome?
Just from typing, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you hear about it every once in a while, but in the 90s it was like an epidemic. Everybody was getting carpal tunnel syndrome, having surgery on their tendons and stuff.
Oh man, yeah.
But how would that make sense that pain could be trendy? But you either have to believe that everyone was faking it, or there's something else there. I think there's something else there. I mean, and that's
deeper.
Like, it's like our brains will hear about pain, and then they think, oh, well, I type all day. Like, I hope I don't ever get carpal tunnel syndrome. And next thing you know, they've got a little twinge in their arm. And then they put ice on it that night. Next thing you know, they're like totally, can't do anything because they've got carpal tunnel syndrome. But the same thing, and again, I'm not a doctor. I know next to nothing about this stuff except that it helped me. But ulcers are another one that you heard about constantly, I think, in the 90s. Whiplash. You ever hear about anybody that's got whiplash anymore?
Don't hear about, like...
I mean, you might every once in a while.
No, there are people who still get these diagnoses, but what you're saying is socially, there's these trending waves of everybody being afraid or constantly trying to manage this trending chronic pain issue. So true, and then it changes to something new.
I have not heard ulcers said in... a decade.
But there was a period in the 90s where everybody had an ulcer. Yeah. But they even said back then it was stress related.
Right.
And so that, like, I don't know, it's like Sarno's belief, and what they've even seen since then, is that your brain is able to, and the pain is not fake, it's real. Right. Like all those people that had carpal tunnel syndrome were in pain. Yep. I was in pain. But I mean, I believe in this stuff, like if my hand had been cut off and grew back, like I know I was in pain, and now I know I'm not in pain. Yeah. Like that, I can never be convinced of anything else. And it's not just all in your head, but there's some psychological thing that goes on. And another thing he brings up is Americans have back pain, but if you go to other countries, nobody has back pain. And they'll say like, oh, you got to be careful how you sit, be careful how you, when you're driving, make sure you keep your good posture, be careful how you lift things. Is your mattress firm enough? Well, maybe it's too soft. Like you can't do anything right, no matter what you do. It's like, well, maybe you're sitting too much. Maybe or you're on your feet all day. Well, that explains it. No matter how you live, if you have back pain, they're gonna be like, well, of course you do. You're sitting down all day, or you're sleeping on a firm mattress.
Make sure it's not high impact exercise. Right. Like you need to adjust that and constantly accommodate all these physical movements and pay constant attention to your pain. But like what you're saying is there's a psychology behind what you're paying attention to. You're constantly managing and being aware of like little subtle things that might, the increase of awareness of pain is partly psychological.
Yeah. And it's a fear thing. Like you're constantly thinking like, especially if you've had back pain before, let's say you hurt your back, which happens. That I mean, you can hurt anything. You can hurt your hand, your arm, your back, whatever. But you hurt your back and you remember being down for 2 or 3 weeks. And then you're reading this stuff all the time. You got to be careful how you lift things. Sarno would give examples of bodybuilders and weightlifters that could go in the gym and lift hundreds of pounds. And then they would come to him or go to a doctor and say, well, how'd you hurt your back? I was pulling my gym bag out of the back of my car.
Right.
Or I stepped out of my car wrong. Or I was twisted a little bit when I sneezed. It's always these weird, like, but you can lift hundreds of pounds. Like, and his thing is like, that's not how this works. Like, your back is strong and our bodies heal themselves.
Yeah.
And like, I've done things like overexerted lifting things or whatever, and my back will be sore for a couple days. But now it's not that soreness turns into a year of me being down on my back. Now I'm like, okay, my back is sore. That makes sense. Just like if I went out and threw a baseball for a night and I'm not used to it, my arm might be sore.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, one thing that, we've talked about, and I love this topic so much, because in terms of like cultivating the ordinary, like, this is ordinary life, right? The people deal with chronic pain, whether it's back pain or knee pain or carpal tunnel or, whatever this may be. Like, it's a reality that stops people from enjoying life every day.
But there's a bunch more that, like, we're just scratching the surface by talking about back pain specifically. And I think Jess has a story that will, that's not exactly the same, but.
I mean, the conversation I remember you and I had, 2019 maybe, about John Sarno and this book and your experience with your back pain basically being completely relieved.
Right.
Was this connection with repressed emotions, especially anger. And so can you tell us a little bit more about what you learned about what it looks like to repress emotions and how that shows up as pain for some people?
Yeah, I don't totally, I feel like you understand and have researched more about that. And that's the thing I love about this. Like, I'm not an expert on this. And so when I read the book, it sounds unbelievable, but a lot of people have said just by reading the book, by getting the knowledge that this is not a physical problem, but an emotional and mental problem, they got relief. Right. So I read it, I totally bought in, but my back still hurt. And so I'm like getting frustrated. And like one of the things Sarno says is you can get back to your regular physical activity. So I would go out and try to walk at night with Ashley, and I'm just powering through, like thinking like, you got to do this. Like, it's not like you can do this. Like, don't let it bother you. But it wasn't getting better. So then I read about it and read that some people need to seek more help. And I found a therapist online. I met with her on Zoom. I signed up for 7 sessions. And after the 6th session, I canceled the last one because I was completely 100% pain-free. And it still sounds unbelievable for me to say that. And I wish I could talk for an hour about this, but I would sit on the stoop throwing a volleyball to my daughter while she was learning to play volleyball, because I could not physically stand in the yard and play volleyball with her. That's my memory of that time.
Wow.
But what I felt like was so amazing about was when I met with her, I thought, okay, I'm going to have to be digging up childhood stuff and like, what am I actually angry about? We didn't get into any of that. I don't, to this day, I mean, I can think of a few things I was probably repressing, but I don't know. I didn't have to get through all that. She taught me to like look at the pain with curiosity and to just acknowledge the pain and basically to take away the fear response. And maybe that's an even deeper topic that we won't get into, but just learning to look at it that way. She'd give me little exercises to do. Stand at your desk. At that time, I could sit down. Whenever I was sitting down, I wasn't in pain at that time. So she would have me stand up and describe the pain I'm feeling, and then say, if you want to be out of pain, just go ahead and sit down. But if you want to just kind of look at the pain and acknowledge it and say, yeah, that hurts, but I'm okay, I'm safe. So I would start doing that. And she would say, well, why don't you do that at your desk this week at work and just time yourself? See if you can do a minute, but don't, if it hurts and you want to sit down, just go ahead and sit down. And that shift in my thinking, like powering through and like, I can do this, to just almost just like, kind of like, it's not a big deal. If I want to be out of pain, I'll sit down. Somewhere with that shift, it just gradually started. Like I'd be driving or walking in Lowe's or whatever, and I would think, oh man, my leg's not hurting. My back doesn't hurt. Or my back hasn't hurt for the last 15 minutes. And then, of course, it would start hurting. But it just became, it's like when you go through like a loss or something, you're thinking about it constantly. And then you notice, I haven't thought about it for a while.
Right.
And then it hits you. But then before you know it, you've gone a week and you haven't been in pain. And then you've gone a month. And then I just, pain was no longer a part of my story at that point. And I mean, I've got an email I sent to her basically like, you saved my life, and I can't believe this, but I don't need the last session. So it was such a night and day thing over the course of 6 weeks. It wasn't like I just woke up and it was gone. So it was a journey, but it was such a night and day thing that I just still can't even believe that it's true.
Yeah. I remember hearing you tell that story, and you connected me also to Chelsea Moyer. So she did the pain reprocessing therapy.
Yes.
That's like a very scientific, I mean, pain science has come so far. I mean, the last 15, 20 years, it's incredible how much they know now about pain and the mind-body connection. You know, it's no longer that you just have, you know, this body with all these nerves or whatever, and that, you know, the things happening in your head, your thoughts, your emotions, your experiences, but they're so intertwined and connected with stress and the way that we, you know, that interview that you talked about with the NBA player.
Yeah, Michael Porter Jr.
Michael Porter Jr. with Nicole Sachs, that she talked about pain as always protective, right? So when we are experiencing pain, our brain is trying to protect us. So sometimes, though, it's misfiring. So it makes me think, too, I really would like to talk about the personality traits of chronic pain sufferers. I know Dr. Sarno covers this, and just different authors I've learned from. There's just so many common things that people would want to hear about to see if this fits them. Yeah, people with type A personalities that are hyper responsible or sort of perfectionistic, they put a lot of pressure on themselves. They you know, they hold a lot of stress, you know, and just power through it. You know, those are the types of people he describes that end up with these chronic pain conditions. Whereas, at least in my observation, you know, people who have an outlet to get frustrations and stress out don't typically. I mean, you're like that, Trav.
Yeah, because I mean, I just gut reactive. If I feel something, I say it. I have to do damage control later. Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said it that way. You know, and I'm probably a lot of what's inflicting your bodily pain in terms of your emotional pain.
Well, yeah, he has an outlet, right? You know, and you run also, and you tell it like it is. You aren't afraid of conflict. Those are things that are actually help you in the area of not repressing, you know, the stress
and coming out,
certain emotions and stuff like that.
Held.
Yeah, I think in Sarno's book he attributes it to rage. It's like a hidden, repressed rage, and that's what's causing your pain. Now, he was the first one to kind of like pioneer this stuff I think he did it in the 80s, maybe 90s. But since then, a lot of people have researched things, and there's been a lot more personality traits described that also leads to the same result. I still to this day don't know what mine is, if I'm repressing rage or fear or whatever it is. I do have a heart condition that's caused me a lot of stress and fear, and I feel like that probably had something to do with it, but I don't know. So I do think it's important to say you don't have to go through this whole journey of self-discovery or anything for this to help you.
Right.
But Sarno's thing was all of us have a conscious mind and an unconscious mind. And the unconscious mind is like a spoiled toddler, and the only thing it cares about is you and your happiness. And anything that gets in the way of that, it hates. So even though I may say I love my kids, I'd die for my kids, my unconscious mind is going to say, you have to wake up all night and take care of them. You know,
Right,
you have
right.
to. You didn't get to go to that concert because you
Yeah.
had to stay with
Yeah.
the kid, and that causes. Sarno would say that causes rage to build up with inside of you that you're not even aware of.
Yeah, that's
Well, and you know, if you think of that same language, like, you know, Christians would call that, like, that's the flesh, right?
Right.
You know, people in psychology world will call that the ego. You know, it's that part of you that just wants what you want.
Yeah.
Right?
yeah. I that makes so much sense. There's a line by someone that said to carry a grudge is like being stung to death by one bee, and I mean it, and that really, like, physically, that's kind of that stinging pain of. But anyway, so it makes a lot of sense.
I think of a song that I like that's he's talking about emotions, but he says push it down and it comes out sideways. And that's how I think of pain. And and to me, I don't know exactly what part of my personality causes this, but I know it's a fact that it does. But I know that when I'm faced with stressful situations or decisions, I avoid things. I don't face things head on. I would rather avoid. And so as much as I wanted to feel good, I would have done anything for my back to stop hurting. I believe, and this is embarrassing for me to say, but I believe a part of my brain that had control over whether or not I feel pain in my back said, you're safer if you're laying in bed. You don't need to be making those decisions. You don't need to be holding people accountable.
Right.
You're safer in bed. You've got an excuse. I didn't want the excuse. I was feeling like, no, I can do this. I got this. I know what I need to do. But I feel like somewhere that controls that needed an excuse. And if you're laying in bed, nobody can be mad at you. If you're laying in bed, it's not your fault. Think about, and maybe, like, did some part of me want other people to say, man, imagine how good Danny would be at certain things if he didn't have that back pain.
True.
And like I said, that's embarrassing for me to say, but it's not. I never consciously thought that.
Yeah.
But after I learned about this, I'm like, well, that's probably a lot of the source of what I was going through.
Right.
And I think about, like, Michael Porter Jr., like, think about the pressure to be the most highly regarded recruit at Mizzou. And then he ends up having 2 back surgeries. I always think about Larry Bird, like, if you're as old as we are, Travis, and remember Larry Bird always had back problems. And they've got the most state-of-the-art technology and doctors. No one could figure out what was up with his back. And I'm like, Sarno could have fixed you. And then we'd have, like, then it would be really a discussion of, like, who was the greatest.
Larry's career extended.
I truly believe that. There's so many videos of him laying on the sideline and they're, like, just holding his back. I'm like, yep, I've been there.
And not super old. I mean, he definitely was up in age, but
but it had been a problem throughout his career. And I almost feel like I know that was his problem.
Oh man, yeah. Well, I know that's what Danny's saying is so much of your experience personally. So right, and with all this, so tell us take us into your journey and story about that.
Yeah, so in 2019, shortly after having Dakota, so I was maybe six months old, I still had sciatic pain, which I thought was just pregnancy related. You know, so same problem as Danny, and I didn't have a formal diagnosis or back scans, but I had certain days that I couldn't walk. All I thought about was how to manage the pain. I did physical therapy and did, you know, certain stretches, and I made friends with a foam roller, and, you know, it was constantly trying to find ways to find relief, which all of those activities and chiropractic care, all of those things did help me temporarily get out of pain for just a short time, and then it would come back. And you know, what I've learned about some of this just pain science is just when you do stretches or when you put heat on a place that hurts, you bring blood flow to that area, which does bring relief. But the source of the pain, if it is mind-body related and your mind is actually sending pain signals, which it reduces the blood flow to that area, which is that protective response. Like, that's just how we're designed. You know, God designed us to say, okay, well, this is better, right? to have this pain, not consciously, than to face something that is emotionally scary. You know, and that's my story. Like, I'm not real comfortable with conflict. I am a people pleaser. Well, I'm not going to say I am. I was more of a people pleaser.
Now you don't care.
Now, well, I've learned how much of that stuff is so damaging for myself and, you know, relationships, all kinds of things. But naturally, just my family of origin, it was just, I had to be the good girl. Like, I put a lot of pressure on myself to show up and take care of people and all the things. And so here I am, like, child number 5, you know, Travis is caring for his dad, and, you know, we have just all these things just kind of swirling around us of stressors. I mean, the most probably stressful time.
The one time when you don't want to be in pain.
Exactly. Like, I think my brain was like, just lay in bed.
Yeah.
It'll be better. And not that I consciously wanted that, but I also had appointments with Chelsea Moyer, who you put me in touch with to do the pain reprocessing therapy. And one of the questions I remember she asked me was, pay attention to the time of day that the pain comes. Is it the same time of day? What's going on during that time of day? Like, you know, and what I started to notice was I didn't feel like I could ask for time to just go rest. Like, that felt wrong. I felt guilty. And so my back would start hurting, and then I had no choice to just go lay down. Like, I couldn't ignore it. It was very serious. Yeah. So, you know, through doing some appointments with her and starting to just go through some of these Sarno's daily reminders of, like, always think about it in terms of psychological and not physical, you know, and just remembering, okay, I can be curious about this and observe my pain and not be afraid of it. I learned about the 5 F's, right, that make pain worse. So I'd love to share that if you're trying to fix it, if you're afraid of it, if you're frustrated with it, or your focus is just on it, or, you know, depending on your personality, you're just, like, fighting against this, like, pain problem. All of those things reinforce pain getting worse and turn up the volume. But what I learned instead was, like, that curiosity of, like, noticing, naming emotions, and then just kind of later I found soul care stuff and, you know, but just really going, I need to take care of my internal world instead of just focusing on all this physical stuff. That's the root of it.
It can send you down a big, like, rabbit trail. Like, it's because I've kind of seen you go down this journey, which has been awesome. But when you see something as clearly as we did with being in pain, discovering this stuff, and then not being in pain, like, your worldview shifts, and you're like, okay, there's something to all this stuff. And, like, all the stuff I've read about stress response, emotions, like, and the importance of there's people that treat their chronic pain the same way an alcoholic will treat their alcoholism, where they have to journal every day and talk about, are there things I'm angry about today? They're right. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say they have to, but they do. Like, they say it's that important for me to stay on top of this. And so they'll write down every day, what is there anything that's making me mad? What am I fearful about today? And they attribute all that stuff to them not getting back in pain.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Isn't there something to the brain's need for predictability that also plays into this, of, like, where that even makes sense of, like, sometimes with the predictability side that the brain needs?
Yeah, I mean, I think
that fit?
I think because your brain wants to know what to expect, like, expecting pain becomes safer than the unknown or uncertainty.
So the unknown of maybe a conflict means not just that it could be scary, but what's going to happen in that conflict. I don't know.
Right. So if I am in pain, then I don't have to face the unknown conflict
so
or the unknown
is, let's just
challenge.
not face that unknown.
Yeah. And I think that that's where it's like, we're not saying all pain is this what we're talking about. But what we have in our own stories discovered is that oftentimes there are psychological reasons that the experience of pain gets turned up, and it becomes a pattern that there's not something physically that needs to be healed at this point. It's just nerves and neurological signals that just keep misfiring.
Yeah. And that I've read something about people that get hooked on pain pills over this. We probably all know someone that had a back injury, got prescribed pain pills, and couldn't get off.
Right.
And so what a lot of their experience was, they took the pain pill, it helped them feel better, but it also has this like effect on their brain that you feel good, you feel happy about things. From my understanding of pain pills, a lot of them don't numb the pain, it just changes the way you think about the pain. And so rather than their back eventually healing, the same thing that's happened to us, their brain creates pain and more intense pain because it wants more pills. And so whatever it is that we wanted to avoid, to whatever, our brain says you need pain so that you'll do this. I'm probably not even explaining it well, and I don't know that we need to, because I don't understand it and it still worked. I don't think you have to be an expert on all this stuff to get relief.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I just happen to enjoy
like you know more about it than I do,
all this
for sure.
stuff. Well, I went down a whole thing I used an app called Curable with exercises for healing mind body pain, and I think I looked at Dr. Schubiner's program. He's got one. Not because I was just in constant pain and I just was like dying, but I wanted to understand it. Because it is fascinating, and it goes along with some of the, like, even just the coaching work that I do with people, because, we are very complex.
Yeah.
I think another thing just to mention that was very true for me, I don't know if it's true for you, Danny, but I think it's 67% of chronic pain sufferers are kind of in that category of, highly sensitive or, pretty emotional or even creative people, which means, based on my learning, they're dominantly using their right brain. We use both sides of our brain, obviously, but people tend to lean right brain or left brain more in terms of personality and all kinds of things. But what that just means is you are way more attuned to sensations. It also, a benefit to creative people like musicians and artists and things like that, is you're highly aware of nuances of people's facial expressions and emotions and all these things going on. But then when it comes to yourself and your own experience, it turns up those sensations.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because I think the last time I was on, we talked about songwriting, and I said, like, I can't write a song about something that happened yesterday. It's got to be like 20 years later or something. But I see myself doing that with, like, it's very hard for me. Emotions hit me really hard, but I'm not outwardly emotional. So they're in there and they need to get out, but they don't until later. And meanwhile, my back hurts. So it's,
Maybe you need to write the songs on the spot and not wait.
It's like I can't feel it in the moment. There's something else there. It's like I'm not saying I never feel emotions at the time, but like a lot of times I think the way I think about it, and I'm realizing this as I say it, is I know I'm very sad about something, and I think I need to find the right time to express this emotion. Like, when I'm alone, I'll play a sad song on the piano and feel this. But for now, I'm going to try my best not to cry. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so things are getting trapped in there. And we've been told all our lives, don't bottle things up. But
even just culturally, like, especially for men, it's not okay to have emotions. It's not okay to be sad. Like, don't cry, buck it up. Like, You know, there's a lot of layers of conditioning that tells you that it's not safe to let yourself feel things.
And all these strong men are walking around with their back.
Exactly.
Football injury.
Yeah. Oh, that's another. I want to say this because that's another thing that Sarno talks about is a lot of times it did start with a real injury, but your body heals itself. So a lot of people are going to say, well, I've never been the same since the car accident. I've never been the same since football, or I did this when I was skiing or whatever. And ever since then, I've always had this chronic pain. He, as a doctor, would say that's not how it works.
Interesting.
But we all believe that's how it works.
All right, Jess, let's pick up back to your story. Take us back in. Where things went from where you earlier said what happened.
Right. So, yeah, I shared that I was dealing with the sciatic pain on a regular basis, and then I sought, pain reprocessing therapy. And for me, it wasn't 6 weeks. I think it was about 4 months of kind of volleying back and forth. And I think if I am looking back, there were times of still trying to fix it because I was just so annoyed by it. I was still trying to battle against the pain instead of really leaning into the kind of psychological tools, writing, journaling, letting out what was in there. There was just so much that I don't think I fully knew that I needed to actually deal with. And I think because of our life, I also didn't have the time to, or I didn't think I had the time to really address what was going on with me, which was kind of the source of this stuff, not the actual pain. But when I really buckled down and I started taking time to journal each day, I would go on walks and just let myself think my thoughts and feel my feelings. Just those things alone were transformational. I always, prior to that, put myself last. I would get all the things done in the house and help all the people before I ever took any time for myself. And I flipped that and I started midday just doing what I needed and taking that time, and little by little that pain subsided. Now I still deal with pain on a regular basis, but is it an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10? No, it's like a 2 or 3. And when I notice it, I know what to do to kind of move through that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember talking to you about it, and like I kept wanting to check in, but I also know like you can't put pressure on it and stuff. but I remember like seeing your process of finding relief. So it makes me happy that you actually looked into it. And that's what I want people listening to this to do.
Yeah.
Look into it, see what you think.
Yeah, so that's another thing just to kind of take us out is, do you have any recommended resources or anything that you just, if you were to send somebody to learn more about, to see if this is a fit for them, what would your top recommendations be?
If I think that they'll actually do it, I recommend the book, Healing Back Pain by John Sarno. And it was his first book that he wrote on it. So he actually wrote some updated versions. I bought both of them. There's at least 2, but I never read them. I don't know why. So I can't recommend those.
In case the pain comes back. Another version.
They're probably really good.
Yeah.
But so I always recommend Healing Back Pain. But I also recommend there's a video you can look up on YouTube if you just type in Sarno 2020, like 20/20. Because the old, maybe it's still on. Is 2020 still on?
I don't,
60
that's
minute
a great
style.
Call. 60.
But
is Stossel still around?
I don't know. I don't know what's going on with Stossel.
2020 has a whole new meaning now.
That's true.
Yeah. But John Stossel had a segment on 2020 where he interviewed Sarno, and they talked about some of his success stories. Howard Stern, the radio DJ, credits him with Sarno was saving his life. Like he was in constant pain. Another radio guy, Don Imus, or I don't know who he is really, but there's quite a few high-profile people that have found relief through this, including to give, what do you call that, where you ruin the ending of a story?
When
you like spoil a movie for somebody. A spoiler.
A spoiler.
Spoiler alert.
To give a spoiler alert, at the end you find out John Stossel himself had a horrible back, and Sarno fixed it. So I point people to that video. What were you gonna say?
Maybe this is a different video, but we saw one where Stossel was trying to convince his brother, who's a scientist.
Yeah,
is
it's that
the
video.
Same one?
It's
and
that
he
video.
Wouldn't do
his
it.
brother won't see the doctor.
Do it, and he's like, my back is
He's like,
fixed.
he fixed me.
And he's like, yeah, I'm not.
He's like, it seems too simple.
Yeah.
That can't
That's
work.
it. It seems too simple.
Yeah. But,
Yeah.
well, I mean, but they address that, and it's like, it's one of those things where I don't think you can read the book and not understand it. This is not some like out there, like kind of like hippie style, like heal yourself.
Right.
It's not like, if you read it, it's like you can't go 2 pages without saying that does make sense so far. And then you read 2 more pages and you're like, it still makes sense.
I'm still with it.
So long-winded answer, that video I think is awesome. It's like there's a grainy version on YouTube and the book. But if you think there's any chance this is you, look at those 2 things. And there's a million resources online. There's a million resources now.
Yeah. A few of the ones that I second those recommendations. And I also, the book that I read by Dr. Sarno, after looking at healing back pain, is called The Mind-Body Prescription. And so that I really enjoyed. Like, that was just a lot of really good reminders. It gets into, I think it was a later book, and he even had more, research at that point. And then anything by Curable. So they have a website, they have an app, those are really good resources, and they're just leading in pain science. So you have lots of different doctors that are all teaching about mind-body syndrome, basically, which is just another word for TMS, tension myositis syndrome. There's a podcast by Curable, but there's also, a lot of people who listen to the show come from a Christian perspective, and so there's a woman who has a podcast called Thought by Thought Healing, and she does a very good job. She's like a mind-body coach. And so if you just want like short little videos and you want to find a few that fit what you're going through, she's got so many. Everything from back pain to, even autoimmune disease, fibromyalgia, like all these like chronic conditions that are kind of a mystery to a lot of doctors, and people just have to manage them.
And Sarno does believe that fibromyalgia is another form of this.
In that category.
Yeah, and I know that's sensitive because
it's
because people think that we're saying your pain's not real.
Oh, it's
and
absolutely
we're
real.
not saying that at all.
Yeah.
Someone that's been through the type of pain that we've had could never say that. It's 100% real.
Yeah.
It's a physical thing, but your brain is turning something on that should be off.
Right. Yeah, it's your brain's, Curable says it's your brain's opinion of pain. It's not a fact. It turns up sort of this signal when it doesn't have to be that high,
So the question that I'm thinking, and I'm thinking others are thinking too, is okay, major dramatic success, major turnaround with this, kind of new life and freedom from pain, but has it come back, and does it still happen sometimes, or relapse, or however you want to call it?
Yeah, my pain today is a 0, maybe a 1. I've had 3 relapses, and 1 is what made me think to talk to you about this because it was last week.
Wow.
But I've had 2 times where I start getting sciatic nerve pain back, and then it's mostly been the sciatica, and both times I'll get frustrated. I feel myself getting fearful, like what's going on? Why I'm healed from this? What's going on with this? And that's like I said, it's not a conscious thing, but I can almost notice like a panic in the back of my brain, like here we go again. Both times I've read about it. I've gone back to Sarno's 12 daily reminders, watched videos, and within a day or 2 it's gone. This last time I just bought a new washer and dryer combo. It weighs like 300 pounds. A friend was helping me move it, and my back was sore afterwards. And I'll say this, since I read this book, I've moved pianos, I've lifted stuff. I don't worry about my back. I don't think about it. my back will be sore sometimes, but I know that's normal. That's a muscle soreness. This time, after moving that, it turned into something more. It turned into I could barely walk. I'm like rolling off my couch, and I'm like, man, I really hurt my back this time moving that washer and dryer. And then after like 3 days of it, I'm like, this is not getting better. This is TMS again. And I'm like, what the heck? Here we go again. And so I sat down and watched a lecture from Dr. Sarno. I know this sounds crazy, but when you do this, you'll become a believer like I am.
Disciple of Sarno.
I watched a video, and my pain was about 50% better that night. I woke up the next morning. I'm like, shoot, I should have been better today. That afternoon, I watched another video, and my pain's like down to 10%. Over the next 2 days, it just gradually disappeared.
Yeah.
And so that's the weird part. Like, knowing it is most of the battle, but it's still not like a switch that gets flipped.
Right.
You got to let your... And I'm going through some, like, emotional stuff right now that we won't get into.
Yeah.
But I have to think, like, for whatever reason, my brain used moving that washer and dryer combo to lay me out for a few days.
Yep.
And I did. I laid down on the couch and did nothing for 3 days because my back hurt.
Yeah.
But on a day-to-day basis, and let me say this too, when I got rid of the back pain, I was trying to get rid of my lower back pain and calf pain. I never thought the sciatica would go away. I wasn't even trying to get it to go away. That wasn't even my biggest issue. It just went away with everything else.
Wow.
I thought that was still a spinal stenosis thing maybe.
Right.
But it went away, and on a day-to-day basis, my back pain is 0.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I have to tell this story to follow that up because I have a similar, I mean, for years at times emotionally, like my left hip has always been the issue, will flare, and I have to kind of go through all these steps. Well, about 3-4 months ago, I started getting migraines. And I've never had migraines before, and nor did I actually think it was mind body. I thought there was something serious going on. So I got CT scans. Everything was normal. I adjusted my posture because I was pretty sure that it was related to what they call tech neck, because when you work on your
carpal
phone,
tunnel.
Yeah.
It's the new carpal
It is.
tunnel.
It
Tech
is.
neck.
We
Okay,
could make
there
a
we
fortune
go.
off this.
That's right.
We need to sell a device, knowing the cure. This is how they make money anyway. They know the cure, but they sell you a device.
oh my gosh.
We'll be
I
millionaires.
got a neck pillow, and I got all these little tools to help solve my tech neck,
Yeah.
right? And then you and Travis and I started talking about this episode about chronic pain, and naturally I'm thinking about my hip. But then about a week ago, I was like, I wonder if these migraines that are posture related and, due to like looking down a lot, I wonder if it might be mind body. So I started applying some of these like things to it, and just letting myself be curious, not be afraid of it, like do all the things. And sure enough, like the last week, I've had almost no pain.
Wow.
And again, it's like, I mean, I was having there for, I think, a week and a half. I had migraines almost every single day.
Laid out.
And we were all kind of scared.
Yeah.
Like, why
You
is
start
she
thinking
getting
the worst.
It is. Yeah.
Do I have a brain tumor?
Yeah.
I mean, all these things. I've never had migraines in my life before, but they just came on. So.
But when you see it, when you understand TMS and the mind body thing, you see it everywhere. You'll start seeing it in people, and you'll know people that has had an issue their entire life, and you're like, I know what that is. And it's a really hard thing to bring up with people for me,
Yeah, it is.
because it's like, I'm not invalidating what you've been through at all. I'd like, maybe just try this, like see what you think about this book is what I do. But I'm excited to be on here because I want people to know, and I want people to do their own research. Like, don't believe it. Read the book and see if I'm right.
Yeah.
That every 2 pages you're going to be like, okay, it still makes sense.
Yeah. Well, we are so thankful that you came to tell your story and give me the opportunity to tell my story, because I don't know that I would have done that on our podcast.
Yeah, I love it. I love this episode. I love the topic.
Yeah.
And that your passion to come out and just want to help other people that you're seeing that are just like...
I know how miserable it is, and you don't understand it unless you've gone through it. It's miserable. And I'll give one more resource. I want you to put my email, put my phone number on there.
There we go.
Because I love to talk about this stuff. I'm not My brother had a problem with his foot, and he knew about everything I'd been through. And we got on the phone and talked for like 2 hours. And I was like, I think this is a mind-body thing. And he texted me the next morning and said, I don't know if it had anything to do with our conversation or not, but that this is the least pain I've been in like months.
Oh, man. That's
and then he gets into more Sarno stuff, and now that pain is gone. Yeah. So I've seen it happen with other people.
We'll include your email. So
put my email, put whatever you want on there. People
good.
Can contact me however they want.
Right on. All right. Great time talking. We'll see you later.
Thanks, guys.
Yep. Thanks for listening to the podcast today. I hope you found something helpful, hopeful, or thought-provoking. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to any resources mentioned in the podcast. And we also have links in the notes for our own resources to check out. We would really love to hear from you. And we're also really grateful for your support by sharing the podcast episodes with your friends and family and leaving a rating and review. May we all regain and maintain our wonder, hope, and inspiration as we look at our ordinary through new and fresh eyes.